Ferocious wildfires have already claimed the lives of 5 people in California as a record-breaking heatwave, coupled with severe drought and gusting winds, burned through more than 55,000 acres in just 2 days. And 37 people were killed during flash flooding and mudslides in Kentucky, which swept away homes and left hundreds stranded. And yes, America is used to extreme weather, but there's no doubt the effects of human-induced climate change are making things far worse. Which is why there was rare jubilation in the Senate last night.
The yeas are 50, the nays are 50. The Senate being equally divided, the Vice President votes in the affirmative, and the bill, as amended, is passed.
When after 2 years of wrangling, President Biden all but secured the climate change legislation he'd pegged his presidency to.
As you know, it's been a long, tough, and winding road. At last, we've arrived, and we are elated. We've changed the world in a way that you rarely get an opportunity to do that.
And that's no exaggeration, because as the world's second biggest carbon emitter behind China, having America lower its emissions from gas-guzzling cars and power stations will help the world stay closer to the international goal of limiting future warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius from pre-industrial levels. So what does the bill include? In total, nearly $370 billion over a decade to drastically cut America's greenhouse gas emissions. That includes $160 billion, mostly in tax credits, to help speed the production of solar panels, wind turbines and batteries. $60 billion to incentivise clean energy manufacturing, and another $60 billion to help protect lower-income communities from the worst effects of climate change. That it happened at all is a near miracle. The bill was twice blocked by the Democratic Senator Joe Manchin, who faced heavy lobbying from his powerful coal state of West Virginia. What do you say to those who say you're hijacking the president's climate agenda such that he turns up empty-handed to Glasgow?
Not at all, my God.
It looked like Joe Biden would have to pass his agenda through executive order, but talks began again in secret last month when Manchin managed to secure new support for fossil fuels in exchange for his agreeing to the deal.
This bill is really landmark climate legislation. It is going to put the United States on a path to meet President Biden's goal of cutting carbon pollution in half this decade. So it's not everything we needed. It's not going to get us all the way to the goal. And it did come with some painful provisions. But, without this bill, we would have even more harms when it comes to climate change.
Ironically, news of the breakthrough came as President Biden arrived in Kentucky to witness the scenes of devastation wrought by the worst floods in the state's history, with entire towns submerged and more rain to come. But he does so knowing he's just days away from signing the largest investment in climate change in US history, whose impact will reverberate not just in America, but across the globe. Well, this is a huge win for Joe Biden politically. Just a few weeks ago, everyone had given up on the idea that this legislation would pass, but then came the breakthrough with Senator Manchin, which has really delivered Joe Biden the victory that he has long sought and long promised the electorate. Couple that with the killing last week of the head of al-Qaeda and other recent successes in legislation on gun bills, for example, and Joe Biden really has had a run of success of late. Now, whether or not any of that translates into success at the upcoming midterm elections is not clear, but it certainly gives Democrats something to brag about on the doorstep, which had been sorely lacking. The Republicans, of course, are up in arms. They tried all they could to prevent the legislation from getting through last night with amendments and so on, but all their actions failed. And crucially, had Joe Biden been forced to push this climate agenda via executive order, A, he couldn't have spent as much money, and B, those orders would have easily been torn up, potentially by an incoming Republican president in 2024. But enshrining this, as he has done, in legislation passed in Congress, that makes it much more hard to undo.
Thanks, Siobhan Kennedy in
Washington. Now, much of the UK is heading into another heat wave this week, with temperatures set to reach the mid-30s as Europe is plunged into its worst drought for decades. Experts say this kind of extreme weather is now becoming the new normal and is likely to get more intense and last longer, with wildfires becoming an extra hazard to farmland and property alike. Emily Wither has more.
We're used to seeing scenes like this in Greece or California. But this is West London, and we're starting to see more and more the devastation that heat waves can cause here in the UK. A Sunday afternoon barbecue quickly aborted. Ricky tried to stop the fire at the bottom of his garden with his hose pipe.
Just trying to save it, just thinking what happened in East London and how those houses went up so quickly. Just trying to stop it getting to the house, really. That's all I was thinking of. And then eventually my son shouted, "Dad, we've got to get out of here."
The London Fire Brigade say that they're still investigating what started the fire here, but that the weather is extremely warm at the moment, which is causing the ground to be very dry, which means even a small spark can cause a fire to spread very quickly, and that they're experiencing a significant increase in fires for this time of year. Not just in London, but the entire country is more vulnerable. Just look at these pictures. A green England on April 16th compared to yesterday when the land is scorched. And there's more heat on the way. The UK is set to face another heat wave, predicted to last longer than the record-breaking temperatures we saw in July, with forecasters saying parts of the country could enter the mid-30s by Friday. We're being asked not to barbecue in parks, make sure that cigarettes are properly stubbed out, and to clear away any glass that can magnify the sun.
We've seen a big increase in the number of wildfire incidents, and we've been seeing the number and the area affected by wildfire creeping up every year since 2015. And for wildlife and for the natural environment, we've seen wildfires on nature reserves. We've seen animals, greater numbers of animals coming into wildlife rescues because they're suffering from dehydration.
And is the UK adapting fast enough to cope with this increase in wildfires?
We're definitely not acting fast enough. And what we see at the Wildlife Trusts is, although we know the actions we need to take, we know what we need to do, whether it's restoring entire landscapes, reintroducing new species to those landscapes, we're not able to act fast enough, and the level of investment coming in for nature restoration isn't high enough at the minute to match the scale of these increasing risks.
This isn't what you want to see at the height of a drought crisis. When Thames Water is urging its 15 million customers to save supplies, a burst water main is flooding London streets. A recent report found England's 9 water companies are leaking almost 2.5 billion litres of water every day. It comes as ministers are urging more water companies to impose hosepipe bans after the driest 8-month spell since 1976. There's water shortages across the continent too, as wildfires rage from France to Spain. The European Drought Observatory calculated that 45% of the bloc's territory was under drought warning by mid-July. The local government in Seville has decided to start naming their record highs. Zoe is the world's first named heat wave. The heat wave hitting the UK this week might not have a name, but its impact will be felt by millions.
Well, earlier I spoke to Rachel Kite, a British academic who's dean at the Fletcher School of International Affairs at Tufts University. She also served as a special representative of the UN Secretary General. I began by asking for her reaction to the vote in the Senate in America.
Well, it's a compromise deal. And so on the one hand, it's remarkable that it's taken more than 50 years to get climate legislation passed in the United States, but that is the state of politics. And you have to remember that this passed with the vote of the vice president. So not one single Republican passed this, but it is nearly $400 billion of incentives that will make a difference because they will speed and scale the move to renewable energy, the ability of people on low income, middle income to get electric vehicles, to get cheaper appliances. But there's also some stuff in there that will support the fossil fuel industry. The fossil fuel industry is concentrated in very low income parts of the country. And so this isn't enough. It's important. It keeps the United States in the game. It makes their ambition still within reach. So I can understand all of the emotions that you've seen on television the last 48 hours.
What more would you like to see?
Well, if this bill is implemented, so if everything is that's in there, it gets us closer to the kinds of ambition that the United States needs to deliver on, along with all the other countries in the international community. But we really do need to drive this through. And so the planning processes, which can slow down the advent of offshore wind in the northeast of the United States, where I am at the moment, the need to move to a green hydrogen economy. This is going to take a lot of planning decisions. This is going to take a lot of support. It's going to need a lot of training for skills. There is extraordinary job growth in the green sector, but I'm not sure that we're producing those skills either in blue collar or white collar jobs at the moment. So this does have to be a whole of government, a whole of country approach. We are in a climate crisis. So this is the beginning. It's by no means the end.
So we've seen wildfires in the UK. We've had a heat wave. There's potentially another heat wave on the way. What's your assessment of the Conservative leadership candidates and their role in tackling climate change when they get in office?
Well, I'm a little stunned, really, that anybody running for the leadership of any political party, let alone to be Prime Minister, in the middle of a climate crisis, a climate emergency, would think that pandering to their electorate by downplaying or making this sound like we need to pick up the trash and stop littering, that's an effective way to run for leadership. We've seen extreme heat. We're going to see more extreme heat. The scientists are very clear about that. We've got water shortages. We have a slowdown in productivity if our railway system and our hospital systems are at risk of extreme heat. And therefore, this is about the economy. This is about keeping people safe and keeping the economy productive. And I would have thought that any leader of any political party would want to grasp that and run with it. And when I'm home and I'm talking to my family, and I'm in rural parts of Britain that vote Conservative, the WI, the gardening clubs, they all understand climate change. I don't understand why any leader would think that you need to talk down to people at a time like this.
Liz Truss and Rishi Sunak have committed, though, to getting to net zero by 2050. From what you say, that doesn't sound like that's enough, and that's not enough commitment.
Well, I think the 2050 net zero is actually an obligation of the UK, and it's part of the fabric of the statutory obligation for the country. So yes, I would assume that would be in case. But I think that the question now is, where do we find the way to protect people? What do we structure in terms of incentives to the economy to move in a greener direction, and stop playing off this idea that you can combat poverty by being less green. In fact, we have to do those two things together.
Rachel Kite, thank you very much for speaking to us.
Thank you.